Thanks everybody for joining us for today's meetup. The topic for today is the case for-profit education. Our speaker is Dr. Andrew Bernstein, and of course we will take questions and comments after Andy is finished. I will also just encourage everybody, if you haven't seen our new Facebook Live show, The Daily Objective, then I would encourage everybody to see it. There are already 4 episodes up. They're also up on our YouTube channel, and it is live every day at 6 p.m. UK time. It's around 20 minutes, and it is worth your time, I think. But for now, this is definitely worth your time. Dr. Andrew Bernstein on the case for-profit education.
Thanks, Razi. Hey, everybody. It's just seems like it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the New York suburbs. I guess I'm in London. It's just this has become just a fixture. So I guess one thing that we need to do is there's a distinction between for-profit education and privatization of the educational system. They're not the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of private schools that are not for profit, but I do think that if any country, including the United States, which is what I know best, I'm going to talk about, if they privatize the educational system, we abolish the government schools and privatize the educational system, I think there will be a number of profit-driven schools, that will spring up. Like years ago, I used to teach, at a profit-driven private school, American Renaissance School in White Plains, New York. But anyhow, here's the thing: the terrible problem with education in the United States today, to put it bluntly, is that the schools of education don't want the kids to master reading, writing. They don't want the kids to master academic subjects. Period. They have a whole different agenda, and that's the main reason why they oppose phonics. They've opposed phonics for 100 years now, going back to the progressives in the World War I era. To put it simply, they have this Platonic vision that, and this is what Arthur Bester called the interlocking directorate. What he means by that, the schools of education, or the teachers' colleges for one, the State Department of Education for two, and the Federal Department of Education. They have this vision. It's very Platonic. We'll IQ test the kids. We'll find the best and the brightest. They'll get the full academic program, mathematics, literature, history, science, and so forth. They'll go on to college. They'll be well educated, and they'll be society's leaders. They'll lead. They'll govern in the classroom and in the legislature. The rest of us don't need that kind of academic training. What we need is practical skills, the driver's ed, sex ed, hygiene. We play varsity sports so that we're physically fit. We learn how to cooperate, with teamwork, and things like that. You just get some academic training, but a lot of vocational training. Wood shop and metal shop, and a lot of vocational training, because we're training people to be good workers. That we should be good at our profession. We don't need to do that much thinking because we obey the wise rules of the state. If anybody who knows the history of philosophy, this is Plato's vision in the Republic, the intellectual king. And Dewey and the progressives shared that. So they have dumbed down the American educational system egregiously. And the interlocking directorate, H.L. Mencken said this decades ago. I don't even know what year this was. He was alive, a long time ago. H.L. Mencken said the only thing it would take to fix American education is to burn down the teachers' colleges and hang all the professors. Now, obviously, you can't do that. It's murder and arson. But we get Mencken's point. Here's the good news: the interlocking directorate, what did E.D. Hirsch calls it? Impregnable fortress. It may well be. We may need to circumvent it rather than change it. But anyhow, the good news is this: if we can privatize the educational system, the overwhelming majority of parents, as opposed to the professors of education and the bureaucrats who run the departments of education, the overwhelming majority of parents actually want their kids to learn academic subjects. They want that, not surprisingly, and they care a lot more about, young Johnny and Judy than the education professors or the education bureaucrats do. They want Johnny and Judy to know how to read, how to write, how to do basic mathematical calculation, how to learn something about American history, and history in general. And I think, if we privatize the educational system, that makes it possible for profit-driven entrepreneurs to open schools. And I think in a privatized system, I think we'd see a lot more profit-driven schools. There may some that still would be not for profit, but I think we'd see some um, profit-driven schools. And of course, in profit-driven schools, in order to make money, you're competing against other profit-driven schools. You're competing against not-for-profit schools, but you're in business to make money, and the only way you're going to get students and their parents' tuition is if you perform. There's a built-in need to satisfy the customers, and the good news here is, I think the customers, the parents, and their kids overwhelmingly want the kids to have an academic education. So the schools that are going to make money are the schools that do well, that do this well, and these are testable. These are testable outcomes. How well somebody reads, what the reading comprehension is, if they could write a lucid paragraph, well, by the time they get to college or college level essay, what they know about American history. I think I mentioned several times I won't mention what school this was, but it's a college in the New York suburbs. It was 20 students exactly a couple of months ago before we went into lockdown. I asked them, if they knew who Patrick Henry was. 20 out of 20 never heard of him. But the thing that was really shocking to me was that 10, fully half of the class never heard of James Madison. And I was like spluttering with frustration. I mean, I know what the educational system is like. I'm in the trenches every day, I know. But I say, he's the lead author of the U.S. Constitution, virtually the sole author of the Bill of Rights, and you never heard of him. And I'm sorry to say, I'm not like angry at you guys. It's the educational system. They don't teach American history. They teach very little American history, and if they do teach American history, very often they use Howard Zinn's book, which is basically Marxist propaganda rather than American history. The good news is, they could get away with that now, in a government-run system. They don't have to compete. Was it like 11 or 12% of American kids go to private schools? Like 88% or more go to government schools. They don't have to compete for students. They don't have to compete for money. But in a privatized system, you do. And since the customers here want academic subjects, they want their kids to know American history. They want their kids to know how to read or write and do mathematical calculations. The schools that will make money will be the ones that excel in that. So that's, I think, the main benefit of for-profit education. You will see a renaissance in academic subjects for millions and millions of students. So that's basically what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Andy. All right, we should have thought about this setup before we
What's
decided to
wrong?
go with it.
What's wrong with the setup?
Well, I need to lean in to be on camera.
Everybody, especially the ladies, want to see your manly mug. So I mean,
Well, if I don't lean in, actually, then maybe people can't associate me with the Ayn Rand Center, and I won't lose my job. Anyway, so yeah, you mentioned how kids are being taught, and I'm thinking, um, is there really any guarantee uh, that in a private system we won't have some of the influences that we have in education today that come from the culture? Basically, progressive education can be done, in a private system. So
that is.
So basically, what is the reason for optimism that private system would be, or a for-profit system would be better in terms of what kids are being taught?
Well, I get your concern. I mean, there is no guarantee, because the parents of the kids today, I mean, if the kids are 8 or 10, the parents might be in their 30s, which means that, they were born in the 1980s, let's say, they were born in 1985 or 1980, they're 35 or 40. So they came through the same deteriorating system that their kids are. It's gradual decline. They came through the same kind of system. They may not care as much as parents in the past did about what kind of education, their kids are getting. I think there's some truth to that. But I still think that most parents want their kids to have, an excellent academic education. And I think, they go to work, they drop the kids off at school in the morning, and they just, blithely assume that the schools are going to do their job and actually educate their kids. And they have very little idea what actually goes on. I think a lot of parents would be horrified if they know what actually goes on. The only basis for optimism here for a profit-driven system to excel in academic education is if that's what the parents want. In the past, they did very, very strongly. I think they still do. If they don't, then then the private schools may not be much better, than the government schools. I think one indication that parents still do is the gradual trend towards homeschooling, which is difficult because parents have jobs, very often. But the gradual trend towards homeschooling is driven. You see the overwhelming preponderance of homeschool kids do very well on academic tests. I think the driving force of homeschooling is parental demand for excellence in academic training and their realization they're not going to get it in the public schools, and they may not be able to afford private schools, and/or the private schools in their area may not be much better. But I still think that's a data point, indicating that parents still want their kids to receive excellence in academic training.
Yeah, I mean, Joseph, do you have your hand up? Okay, Bob has his hand up, so after Bob, we'll go to Joseph. All right, yeah, I was gonna make some semi-funny comment about American history and how it's being taught today, but I'd rather go to whatever Bob has to say. Bob, you're unmuted.
Yeah, the same thing that will drive out progressivism in education is this thing that will drive out racism in our society. And that is you get the government out of the way. And then the rational will tend to rise, to win. So I don't know if you call it a guarantee, but it's certainly the most likely outcome.
That's by far the best chance, like you said, for the rational to triumph over the irrational. I mean, the more power the government has, the more irrational people want to control it. Right? The more power the government has, the more you're going to attract the Hitlers, the Stalins, the Maos. So the less power the government has, the more the more opportunity it gives for the non-power seekers, for the rational creators and producers to rise to the top. So, I think you're absolutely right, Bob.
Yeah, you remove the subsidies from the people who don't do their job well, and you'll find out that the bad guys go out of business.
Yeah, I mean, parents obviously, I think, well, maybe it's not obvious, but I think parents very often want, nutritious food for their kids. I know a lot of parents who they'll let their kids eat at McDonald's like once a week as a treat. But I hear moms tell their kids all the time, no, we're gonna have a proper meal, So I think, parents generally want nutritious food for their kids. They generally want, the best medical care they could find for their kids. And I think similarly, there's historically, it's always been, that the parents wanted a superior academic education for their kids. That may have diminished in the United States now after 100 years of progressivism and the parents and grandparents having gone through those kinds of schools. Nevertheless, I think there's still a bulk of the parents who, given the choice between having their kids get a really good education in these subjects and having the kids get a mediocre or terrible education, I think would choose the superior education for their kids.
And certainly the wealthy are willing to spend a lot of money to get their kids into good places. Look at the ones who've gone to jail recently.
Go to jail?
Yeah, for bribing people.
Yeah, right. Oh, right. That's right. Yeah, and I think you see a lot of middle class parents, and maybe even lower middle class parents uh, taking the time to homeschool their kids, and it doesn't even take that much time. I mean, if they, I know homeschooling families, they'll get started at 8 o'clock in the morning and they'll crank until lunchtime, and then that's it. The kids may have to do some reading later on, to study literature. But other than that, the rest of the day is theirs. I think 4 hours a day of concentrated effort. You know, and I think children get a very good education, especially when And here's the thing: almost everybody realizes the importance of reading, except for the professional educators. But I mean, for more rational people, uh, the parents realize the importance of reading. Phonics is the system that works. The homeschooling parents overwhelmingly use phonics to teach their kids. Kids can learn to read in a couple of months when they're 5. I don't have to wait till they're 6 years old. Uh, and then the whole world of books is open to them. Furthermore, if you have the kids, using phonics, reading really fascinating stories like, Peter Pan or The Secret Garden, stories that are good stories, not the dreadful, inane Dick and Jane readers, which is, even if they taught anybody to read, would just bore them so to tears that it would turn them off to reading. But you read, use phonics, read real good children's books, and the kids learn how to read. They're excited about reading. It's fun. You could mix that in kindergarten with playing ball or playing in the sandbox. It's fun. And then the kids know how to read. They're motivated to read. The whole world of books is open to them. And it's like 3 months of effort to teach the kid how to read. There's a reason why Dewey and the progressives don't want their military against phonics. They don't want the kids to read. It's 100 years later. You think they don't know? You know that any version of the word method is a failure. They know. They use the whole language or whatever because it's a failure. They don't want the kids to, for the reasons that it conflicts with their political vision. It's very evil. The good news is, and by the way, when I said professional educators, I didn't mean to impugn the classroom teachers. There's still a lot of good classroom teachers. I'm talking about the professors of education, like at Columbia University Teachers College.
The ones you're going to hang.
What's that? Oh, the ones who are going to hang. Yeah, the ones H.L. Mencken wanted to hang. I'm not going to go on international YouTube and say I want to hang, anybody, because I don't. I want to fire these guys, But parents want their kids to read, and so the schools that use phonics will succeed. The schools that don't use phonics will not succeed, and the schools that use phonics then will make money, and the other ones go out of business, like Bob said.
By the way, if anybody wants to speak in favor of Dewey or progressive education, I have Andy's word that he's not going to find you.
Yeah, I'm not going to go apoplectic. We'll stay calm and we'll reason.
Joseph, you're unmuted.
Yeah, regarding the phonics method of teaching kids, I think there's a lot that kids can learn on YouTube today. There are many really good videos on phonics on YouTube, and they can also learn to count very early. Do you have any comments on that?
That's true, Joseph. And again, the wonders of the free market, right? But yeah, and years before that, the companies like Hooked on Phonics developed all kinds of tools, that, and lots of parents have been using them, homeschooling parents and parents whose kids go to private schools or government schools, because if the schools aren't teaching the kids how to read, the parents who are paying attention and want the kids to read will use a lot of those Hooked on Phonics tools, videos and books and games and such to teach their kids how to read at home. So I think the in different iterations, the free market here and the profit motive helps enormously to facilitate kids getting a better education. Now in Mindshore, how you going to, if I can ask you a question, how you going to educate the kids? You're going to have schools, or the parents going to do it at home, or what?
Free market.
Free market. Okay. All right. Yeah. A lot of people don't remember. In American history, going back to the Revolutionary period, kids where American education was very good. There's a lot of evidence to support that. You know, Thomas Paine's Common Sense, you know, sold, I forget what it was, like 200,000 copies to a free population of, you know, of several million. You know, or maybe the best example of the literacy levels in revolutionary America was that the essays of the Federalists, which are not easy, let me tell you, you know, it's very sophisticated political science and political philosophy written primarily by Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. But those were largely newspaper editorials. Those were published in the, you know, in the newspapers and read by, you know, every man and every woman. And anyway, the schools were, private schools were very good. There weren't any government schools until the mid-19th century. And very often, literacy was a prerequisite of admission. The schools expected the kids to know how to read in order to get into schools. And, you know, and mom and dad were doing that at home. It's not that hard. Use phonics, you know, and there's 26 letters in the alphabet. There's 40-something sounds, you know, especially if you find something that's fun, that the kids like to read. You know, when my daughter was 2, we used to go in, Borders was still in existence, go into Borders, go into the child section. You know, Penny would wander around, find something. She looked, I guess the cover appealed to her. She'd sit down on the floor. She'd pat the floor next to her. She'd say to me, "Sit down and read to me, Daddy." You know, so I read, you know, all this goofy stuff about dogs that could fly, and you know, and all these things. But she liked it, was the point. You know, she came to realize that there was stuff in books that's fun, and then she was motivated to read, just like she was motivated to learn how to ride a bike. And you know, if you do that with fun stuff and use phonics, then you teach the kids to read, you know, when they're 5 years old. And this is why the private schools in revolutionary America and turn of the 19th century America expected the kids to know how to read as admission into the schools, and they did. It's not that hard, people. It's really not that hard. It's not this tortuous process that the American educational system and the schools of education in this country have turned it into.
And are there any indications that for-profit schools are on the way or on some kind of political agenda or something like that?
I don't know specifically regarding for-profit schools. I know that today you can talk about privatizing the American school system, and it can be discussed. I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, you know, it was like the third rail of American politics. You couldn't discuss the privatization of the school system. Today you can. I mean, more people are aware of just what a horrendous job the American schools are doing. So I think there's more people who are willing to have that discussion. So that's progress. And like I said, if we do privatize the school system, I think we'll see some of those schools will be for profit. And they're the ones that'll have an economic incentive to excel, you know, to meet parental demand for quality education, starting with teaching the kids how to read effectively. That's really the single most important thing, I think, in education. So there may be other people who agree with it, but learn how to read effectively, because I have college students who are good kids. I mean, in many cases, I love these kids. You know, in some cases, I would be willing to adopt them if they didn't have parents. You know, they're good American kids. You know, they're healthy psychologically for the most part. They want to have a career. They want to have a romantic relationship. They want to be happy. And some of them struggle just with the mechanics. They're 19, 20 years old, and I'll give you an example. I won't mention the school. It's a highly respected college in the New York suburbs. 2006, I remember I was teaching a course, Philosophic Themes in Great Literature. I was using great literature to teach philosophy. I mean, what's better than that? And we were reading, you know, Inherit the Wind, and we were reading Anthem, and you know, we were reading Antigone. You know, we were reading, you know, really good stuff, and pulling the, you know, short, and pulling, you know, the philosophic themes, you know, out of these great stories, or these themes of being dramatized. To me, that's the best way to study philosophy. So I made the mistake, originally is a upper division course, college juniors and seniors, cross-listed in the philosophy and literature programs. these 21, 22-year-old kids going to graduate college with a degree in philosophy or in literature soon. I just blithely assumed they could read, and so I was going around the room having the kids read out loud, and I was shocked. I was shocked. I had to stop. I was embarrassing for these poor kids. I had to stop. I did the reading in class. So many of them struggled with the mechanics of reading. It's in a good school, or at least it's highly respected. I was stunned. Here's a telltale sign. If somebody was trained to read by phonics, when they come across a word they don't know, they will try to sound it out. If they've been trained by any version of the whole word method, where they're taught to look at the whole word, not at the letters. Don't try to sound it out. You're not allowed to try to sound it out. Look at the whole word and you guess. If you don't know the words, you guess, from the context. And if the kids been trained by any version of the whole word method, they come across a word that they don't know, they'll stop. They'll just stop. And over and over again, these kids just stop. I thought the look-say method, all these variations on the whole word method, I thought they'd been so discredited by 2006, nobody was using them anymore. I was stunned. I had to stop. I was embarrassed. I felt for the poor kids. I started to do the reading in class. And I noticed just recently in class, because I was saying, this is like 2 years ago. Same school, good school, good kids. I said to them, if your future, I don't even remember the context. I said, your future parents, don't rely on the schools, teach your kids how to read. I said to me, it was very obvious. Phonics is the method. And they looked, a bunch of kids looked at me like, why? I said, oh my God. I said, they went to schools where the teachers militated against phonics, where they didn't use phonics and took the attitude that phonics was outdated. These poor kids. So yeah, the American school system is they're still using variations on the whole word method, and the teachers go to the teachers' colleges and they learn, phonics is outdated, or it's not necessary, or we got a better method, we'll do it this way. And it just doesn't work. And by the way, there are some really good classroom teachers who understand, no, phonics is the system that works, and they smuggle it in. But they have to smuggle it in just because they care about the kids and they care about the kids' education. And very often those teachers will smuggle in real American history, they'll smuggle in phonics, or they'll smuggle in the old math rather than the new math, or the new math, smuggle it in. They get burned out fighting against the educational system. And then, 8 years down the road, 10 years down the road, they quit, and they do something else with their life. And the educational system is deprived very often of the best teachers. It's oh God, if you sat in on my classes, 19, 20, 21-year-old college kids taking, oh God, you should see what goes on in a logic class. It's just painful. These kids don't need grammar. I don't even want to teach logic anymore. It's so important, to learn how to present evidence in support of a conclusion. It's almost hopeless to try and teach it to most of these college kids. They struggle with it. Oh my God, they struggle with it. They have no conception of how to think. It's painful. You'd be appalled. You'd be horrified. It's like, what's Hank Reardon thinking when he's carrying the wet nurse up that slag heap as the wet nurse is dying in his arms? Remember how mother birds teach their fledglings how to fly and so on and develop their wings? Well, mother and father human beings should be doing that for their kids' minds, and they're not. They're sending the kids to these schools where the schools are stunting their minds.
Are these people?
You got me started on this stuff, and I realized I got a lot more to say than I thought I did. I'm sorry, Joseph.
Yeah, are these people able to function well? I have a difficult time understanding how they can function well in life.
Well, that's a good point, and it's not funny. I said several things. First of all, the school system has gotten regressively worse. For going back to 1980, when I first started teaching, till about 2015, that's 35 years. I was using the Fountainhead as the main text in all my ethics classes, and I taught ethics like every semester. So we read Plato, and we read from the Nicomachean Ethics, and we read Kant, and we read Marx and Engels, and we'd read the Fountainhead at the end of the semester, and the kids read the Fountainhead, and a lot of them loved it. And then I would recommend them over, Christmas break or the summer vacation to read Atlas Shrugged. Some of them did, and it was good. But by 5 years ago, I realized that the kids' reading abilities was not sufficient to read the Fountainhead. Even if they listened to the audio book, which they could, the themes were still, it was going over their heads. They couldn't do it. And so one, I had stopped using the Fountainhead. It's just, it's just over the kid's head. And two, in the last couple of years, last 2 or 3 years, I have given up using essay tests in philosophy class. I'm giving them like short answer questions because they can't write a coherent paragraph in many cases, much less college level essay. So my one point here, Joseph, is it's gotten regressively worse. So, like 10, 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't that bad. So I think a lot of those kids could go on, and have real jobs. A second thing is, second point in answer to your question is, although a lot of these kids don't know the first thing about American history and struggle to read and really struggle to write, they do know something about computer science. They know something about the technology. So I think some of them get jobs, tech jobs. I'll go into, so I could read and write, but I don't know the first thing about the technology. So I have my iPhone. I go into Verizon Wireless store when they used to be open, and hopefully they will be again. And I get the tech guys to show me stuff. If they have to write stuff out, I noticed they struggle with that, a little bit. But they do know the technology. And third of all, I think a third point in answer to your question is, I think work experience is very often an excellent type of education. Get out into the work world, and you may be able to slide through school. And a lot, some subset of the kids' problems in school is their own doing. Not some of them could have a stronger work ethic. Let's put it that way. Some do, but some of them could have a stronger work ethic. Because on the other hand, the stultifying form of schooling they had might have killed off a lot of them. A desire for education. But in the work world, you have to perform. And I think then you got to work harder. And I think when you see these same kids who are 22 now, at 32 or 42, they're a lot smarter. They know a lot more. They've matured. They might have they might have worked at their reading. They've read more. And I think the workforce is a kick in the rear end to people to step it up. Step up your game, which is why my daughter's a good student, but she's 17. I think it's time for her to get she's going to college in the fall. I'm going to be raising money, because you have to pay good money to send your kid to college and be brainwashed and be a communist. But I'm hoping she gets a job this summer. She had a job, but lined up. But now with the virus and everything. But the work, having a job every day, you got to be there every day. You got to perform. You got to be there on time. I think that's the best way to learn a strong sense of personal responsibility, and it's a form of education. One last point in answer to your question, Joseph. I've taught a lot of night classes where they're adults. I taught a weekend college where they're adults. A lot of them are women. And a lot of them told me, now they're 40 years old. A lot of the women told me, I was teaching the weekend college, that when I graduated from high school, I wasn't ready to go to college. I just didn't really, wasn't like that excited about getting an education. Got a job, been working for years, got married, had a few children, working mom, I'm in a relationship, I have a relationship with my husband, a relationship with my kids, I got a job. Now, I'm a woman, not a girl, I'm an adult, I'm not a kid. Now, and then you see these 35, 40, 45-year-old students, some of them are men, some of them are women. Now they're motivated. They come to class, they never lack their homework. They haven't forgotten a pencil. They come to class every day. They're prepared. Being out in the work world has matured them, and they're much more motivated. And I think it's the same for these kids we're talking. They should be working. Whatever. They're not ready for college. They should be working, or whatever whether they're doing tech stuff, whether the boys, working for the local gardening company, for the roofing company, and the girls are working. I don't know, in secretarial jobs or whatever. But uh, actually, the girls tend to be better students, but generally, but not always. They should be working. I think the work world would really mature there, and they come back to school, and I think they do much better. But I do think the work world helps people grow up a lot and enhance their skills, including their cognitive skills. So there's hope.
Good.
Let me make a political analogy. Most of these kids at age 20, they're Democrats. They're supporting Bernie Sanders. I wouldn't be surprised 10, 15, 20 years down the road they're not. What was it? Was it Churchill who said, that if you're not a liberal at age 20, you have no heart, and if you're not a conservative by age 30, you have no brain. That was Churchill, wasn't it? Yeah. There's some truth to that. The work world again makes a big difference.
Well, Andy, right before that, you said there's hope, which I'm glad to hear, because we couldn't hear it from what you were saying. That was pretty depressing, and yeah, the fact that you were giving people the fountainhead and now you just don't do it because they can't read is
yeah, it is depressing. I mean, sometimes reality is depressing, and doesn't mean we can't fix it, but.
Well, if you want to take a step in the right direction, considering the current attention span of students, you can start by recommending that they follow the Ayn Rand Center on Twitter, and we'll work our way up from there to the Fountainhead.
All right, I will definitely tell them that, Razi.
All right, so we
have somebody here who may want to remain anonymous, but who is a homeschooling parent. I could see, and I'm tutoring the kids, and these are homeschool kids. They're doing really well. I mean, we just read Anthem, a week or so ago, and I've had college kids who struggled with Anthem because of Ayn Rand's use of the language is so original, so startling. They didn't really get it. Why are they using the term "we" when he's just talking about himself? But these homeschool kids, I mean, they got it, and homeschooling is a big responsibility for parents. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of time. But the parents, but the parents who really want their kids to get an education, they I mean, these are your kids. I mean, it's worth the time. It's worth the time and effort investment for them.
Yeah, and we were talking when we did the Free Market Roadshow event on education, how hopefully from this crisis, one of the things we will see is people now are paying more attention to what their kids are learning, and maybe they won't like what they see, and maybe homeschooling is a direction that things will go in. So we have a question in the chat, then we have a question from Melanie, and then we'll go to a live question in person from our in-person attendee. So David asks in the chat, do you think children should be given a free choice of what they learn about, or do you think they should be forced to learn certain topics?
Children, David, means like young children, like 5, 6, 7, 8, like elementary school children.
David, if you want to elaborate on that, he says any age.
Any age. Some of you guys probably know Maria Montessori's program better than I do. So correct me if I'm wrong on this, but as I'm getting seasick here, but as I understand it, she wanted to have the kids spend the morning hours in school studying the basic cognitive subjects, right? Reading and literature, what they call language arts, reading, writing, literature, math, science, history, and then in the afternoon have a few hours where the kid has to study some subject, but can study any of those subjects that he or she wants. Wasn't that the original program or something like that? Anyway, whether that was Maria Montessori's idea or not, I like it. Basic cognitive skills in the morning, then lunch, recess, you go out in the yard and you play, And then in the afternoon, you have all these materials, and you pick the ones you love. Now, for me, that would have been perfect. I mean, I was in the stultifying, government schools in Brooklyn, and have these options. But for me, that would have been perfect because I knew from the time I was a little kid, I'm a literature guy. Well, I'm a humanities guy. So so I would have done the math and the science work in the morning and get the basic training in those subjects. And then for me, the afternoons I would have spent reading novels, reading plays, reading history, the literature and the history, all the humanities stuff. Was that would have been perfect for me. And I think I think that's a good method. And I think the older the students get, and the more they have basic cognitive skills. So for me, for example, well, I may not be a good example because I knew I was going to be a writer, so I knew what I loved. Some kids do, some don't. But I think as it go through the educational system, and let's say somebody realizes by the time I don't know they're 12, let's say, 13, that the science is what they love, and so I think now by that time in a good school system they would have very good language arts skills. They'd be reading and writing effectively. They would have at least a modicum of knowledge of history, and certainly in the United States they should know American history. And I think the older the student gets, and the more they have basic mastery of the subjects that aren't going to be their field, then I think we should encourage them, to spend more and more time than for this kid, studying science, and studying what he or she loves. So I like that idea of, especially for the young kids at 5, and 6 and 7, to spend the mornings with basic cognitive training, and then the afternoons in the academic field that they love. It's a question: if they're not interested in American history, they should be forced. I mean, we're going to whip. He refuses to read the but I do think the kids should get the basic academic program. If the kid doesn't want the basic academic program, I don't think you force them. It's just go find another school. But in a good school, I guess the term would be required. Yeah, I would require the kids to get the basics of academic subjects, including maybe especially American history.
The next question is from Melanie, or do you want to answer this one last follow-up from David, and then we'll go to Melanie?
How would you require them without force? It's a requirement of graduation. Well, I mean, I've never seen a kid, who went to school and said, look, at 7 years old or 8, whatever, look, I'm gonna do the math work, but bleep the history. I'm not gonna do it. I'm just not gonna do it. I'm going on strike. I'm not gonna do it. I mean, I never heard. I never heard of that. But I mean, I think there could be built-in motivations. You can motivate the kid. Look, you're obviously a smart kid. You're gonna excel in science. It's history. History is important. You can't understand the world, the social world around you without knowing history. It's not difficult to understand the social world without history. It's impossible, because where the world is in any given moment is a direct function of where it's come from in the past. Your intelligence will never be able to grasp the social world around us without a knowledge of history. I would motivate. I would certainly motivate the kid.
Yeah, and I do think, if I understand the sentiment behind the question, yeah, there are definitely cases where, I mean, that's what parenting is. You tell the kids sometimes that they have to do something. It's not like if you go up to somebody who's 30 years old and say you have to learn history now. A parent can tell a child, look, you have to do this, and that's how it is.
Yeah, and hopefully explain to the kid why, not just command it or demand it, but give an explanation, reason with the kid. But yet, look, I want you to understand. And then at the end of the day, you're going to have to do this. But here's why. It's like why you have to eat your vegetables. I wouldn't just require it of the child. I would explain, look, this has tremendous nutritional value. You know, say you may want to stay up till midnight and watch TV, but you got to get up at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning to go to school. You need to be in bed by 9 or 10 o'clock because that's your health. As an 8-year-old kid requires that much sleep. So I would always try. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Rosie. I mean, parents can demand and require children to do certain things, but I would always give an explanation so the kid knows mommy and daddy's reasoning, not just giving arbitrary commandments like a dictator.
So Ella says in the chat, I believe there will be a way to nudge the kids to learn without knowing that they are learning, or change their mind and start getting interested. I think this requires great personalized effort, which makes the case for homeschooling.
Ella, I think you're right.
Okay, next question or comment, we go to Melanie. You should be unmuted.
Yeah. Sure. Melanie Katrugada, I know her.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Melanie. How you doing today?
I'm a homeschool mom, and I guess Andy did refer to me earlier. My 3 kids I've homeschooled since they were born. I mean, we started in the tub when they could sit up by putting those little styrofoam letters around the inside of the tub, and we'd be pronouncing their pronunciation of the letter rather than learning what they're called. Like B was buh. And the kids started putting it together very quickly and learning how to read really young. So it was never forced. It was always fun, because it was kind of colorful, and it was just really fun time. But as a homeschool parent, I had a couple of thoughts I wanted to share and then ask you a quick question, Andy. One thing I've found, I'm also a private music teacher. I have had hundreds of piano students, hate to say that because it kind of ages me, but I've had so many piano students and other instruments over the years that I have found that if someone's sort of reticent about trying a subject or learning something, I've found that even with my own 3, that possibly there's a gap in their knowledge. The hierarchy of learning is a huge deal with, well, obviously objectivism, but Maria Montessori, you would never go on to a new thing or a harder part until you mastered the previous, easier part. And I found that with kids who just can't seem interested or they just don't seem like they're getting it, backing up and figuring out where did that little sort of break in their knowledge in that hierarchy happen, and we kind of cover that. So I've had a lot of transfer students of piano and stuff, and I have to go back and find out where they were having trouble from the beginning. So saying that might help with some of the kids who aren't seeming like they're interested or doing well in certain topics, but checking to see where did they kind of maybe get lost along the way. It's hard, I'm sure, in a class of 30 or 25 kids or 20 kids to check on everyone to see how are they each doing, where did they not get it today, and that kind of thing. So homeschooling, I just was going to say, of course I'm a proponent for that, and it's worked really well, I think. And yes, Andy is one of our teachers that I've kind of got more teachers now working with the kids than I do, because you guys are more in authority of your topic and stuff. So I have to turn it over to somebody else. But one thing I wanted to say, Andy, and ask you, I run into so many parents who hear I homeschool and then they go, oh, I could never do that, and I'm just wondering, is there any way that we could, how could I sort of make a case for homeschooling in a very sort of way to get them to think about it, consider it? Or are there just people out there that think the government is the best place to teach our kids, and there's no hope for getting them to start looking as it more like a responsibility of themselves as a parent?
I think there are some people like that. There's even a name for them. They're called Democrats, but they believe in the government. That they believe in paternalism, and that the government is well suited to take care of us and including educate our children. I think most parents, maybe even amongst Democrats, maybe they're questioning, the ability of the government schools today. The evidence is so overwhelming, and they care about their kids. I think the bigger obstacle that people have said to me, and I'm not a homeschooling parent like you, Melanie. Regina and I sent Penny to Montessori school, but I think the bigger concern for most parents is one, both parents are working, so it's a big time responsibility, and then they have careers and financial needs. And two, a lot of parents feel I don't have the cognitive skills to teach these subjects, and so I think at the very least, we can go back to what's a time honored, recognition. There's a lot of research showing regarding schools that the best schools, whether they're public or private, is where there's a lot of parental involvement. There's a very strong PTA, and the parents are involved in the kids' education. It's not just left to the teachers, because like you said, Melanie, you got 30 kids in the class. I feel for these, first grade teachers or second grade teachers. They got 20 to 30 kids in the class, and they got to try and do their best for all these kids who are at very different levels. But the parents only have a couple of kids, and so it's a time on it. It's almost a cliche. Dad helps the kids when he comes home from working out with their math. On the assumption that math and science was more male, discipline than female, and maybe empirically that's even true. I don't know. But mom or dad, help help the kids with their math homework. They could devote an hour at night, can't they? I mean, I know they're tired. I get it. I know they're tired. I know what it feels like. Or maybe you come home and take a nap. But I mean, this is your son or daughter, right? I mean, you go the extra 10 miles for your child. So you help the kid, devote an hour in the evening to help the kid do the math homework, and that could even, if mom or dad doesn't get frustrated with it, because sometimes the family relationship can get in the way of of this kind of tutoring. But if mom or dad doesn't get frustrated and does this in a very patient and loving way, it could even help with the bonding, with the kid. And another, so where the parents are very involved in their children's education is enormously helpful. And a good example from my own life was with my mom. Now, my mom was a prototypical crazy Jewish mother. I mean, now that I'm older and I understand more. I mean, I can say this. I mean, I feel for the poor girl. She's crazy. Yeah, she was loving. I'm just telling you the truth. She's crazy, and she was no paragon of rationality. Let me tell you, Hillary Clinton looked like Dagny Taggart by comparison, to her. But my mom did love my sisters and I, and she did recognize that education is important. And before we ever went to kindergarten, she had that old time-honored pastime going of flashcards. She taught us the alphabet, so we knew how to say, we knew our ABCs. We knew how to sound out the letters, before we ever went to kindergarten, never mind first grade. We knew the multiplication table. Parents can get involved in their child's education, and it doesn't have to be full homeschooling. They can send the kids to school, but they can still be very involved in their kids' education, because these are their children after all. And that's enormously helpful. There's a lot of research on that. The best schools are the ones where, and some of them are public schools, but the parents are strongly involved in the kids' education. Now, on the other hand, I've heard teachers tell me, oh, parents, yes, parents can be enormously helpful, but oh man, they can be a pain. They can be such a nuisance. My kid's never wrong, that kind of thing. The parents, you need to be rational about this and reasonable and talk to the teachers, let the teachers do their job, and then, be enormously helpful for the kids at home. I think that's, they don't have to give up their career. They don't have to be experts in all these different subjects. And furthermore, the most important thing to me is teaching kids how to read. Phonics works. It's not that hard to teach a 5-year-old kid to read. You don't need to be an expert in any subject. That's critical. And if your kids struggle in math and you don't know that much math, I don't know that much math, but I could take some time to learn the math myself, so I could work with my daughter or son if I have one, or save some money to hire a tutor. But there's all kinds of things that parents can do to really augment their kids' education, not leave it just to the schools. That's short of full homeschooling.
Melanie, do you have a follow-up?
I was just going to ask one more thing, Andy. Do you think that the term public school and private, they always put these two in their camps, but no one ever just really calls it government schools? I have a feeling if people actually called it what it is more instead of public, which kind of puts on this air of like, well, it must be good because, it's the public and everybody seems to know what's right for everybody and social good and all that stuff. I'm wondering if that term government schools would kind of put it in its place, or is our culture just so gone that, like we've got socialized medicine now where the government somehow has, the inside track on what makes medicine work. And so I'm just curious if you think maybe just even terminology, just not like I could change it today, but you know what that whole idea that it's not government.
I will
Yeah.
just say, since it's the Ayn Rand Center UK, this is maybe the one of the few things in which the UK is. I don't know if it is actually you can say this is better, but in the UK, public school is private. Actually, when you say public school, you're
Oh,
referring to private
huh.
schools, whereas government schools are state schools. So
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good. That's exactly right. Like I always tell people about private schools in the United States, they're open to the public. You know, you know, Melanie, you remind me. Every day I like to I quote Confucius, you know, the great Chinese philosopher who said that the beginning of wisdom is to make sure that things are called by their proper names. And yeah, these are government schools. They're run by the government. The government force used to to force kids to go to school till they're 16. Government force used to tax people to finance them. These are government schools, and they're run as efficiently as the government would run any industry. As the government, ran the steel industry or the agricultural field in the communist country. So I think it's helpful to call by their right names, and people, rational people realize, oh yeah, these are run by the government. Yeah, and then see once that that identification is made, the the next step isn't that hard. That is, government-run industries are very inefficient. And you could point out the way what happened when the communists, nationalized the steel industry? Well, it tanks. What happens when the communists nationalize agriculture? Well, it tanks. What happens when the government, socializes the educational system? It tanks. And so on and so on. So it makes it more evident for people to grasp. Boy, this is a form of socialism. It's the socialization of the educational system, and any field which is fully socialized is enormously inefficient. The government, at its best, can be a protective agency, but it's not a productive agency. So I think that helps. I want to go back to we were talking about tutors before, and of course I'm a tutor, so I can talk about it. But that's part of the profit-driven system that that the Ayn Rand Center UK is talking about in this today. Tutors usually are paid, for generally for their work. And again, it's a very effective form of for-profit education. And if I remember correctly, there's a lot in Japan. There's a lot of things in Japanese culture that I don't, support. But education is, really tends to be very strong in the culture. And I've read where a lot of Japanese families, if the government schools, the kids aren't responding well in the government schools, they send them to tutors after school. They go, to privately run tutoring organizations where they pay, and then the tutors provide, a better education, lift the kids up. The one thing of many that I would not support in Japanese culture is they tend to have that tiger mom mentality where you just relentlessly push the kid, you got to excel, and it's like, I've seen it in the United States, that kind of mentality where, somebody even wrote a book, was it Defense of the Tiger Mom? I forget. I think it was a Chinese American woman. It was horrible. I don't remember if she said this, or maybe somebody was satirizing her attitude, but she said, yeah, my daughter committed suicide at age 27, but by God, she played Carnegie Hall at age 26. I go, what? I mean, that's like the mentality. And some of these kids commit suicide because, they didn't do so well on these exams. They didn't get into the top schools. So I would not endorse that. But, a non-relentless pound a kid in the head, a very encouraging attitude towards doing well in education is really important. And a lot of the Japanese kids do very well. But anyway, the profit-driven tutorial system that they use there, from what I've read, again, it's part of the profit-driven education that we're talking about. It doesn't necessarily have to be the schools itself. They could be these tutoring companies and/or just private tutors as individuals. But it's almost always for money. It's almost always profit-driven, and it generally helps. And parents got to get some bang for their buck, right? It's not their tax dollars where they have no choice. Now they're shelling out money voluntarily. They want to see results, so they're not gonna pay the money, nor should they. Oh, one last thing about the language. We're talking about government schools. That's why, you know, this is one of my little bit off topic here, so I'll make this brief. Just the way Ayn Rand wanted to revitalize the term selfish, you know, its conventional meaning, where it means, you know, you victimize innocent others to get whatever you want, to, you know, objectivist meaning of hold life promoting values, you know, achieve those values and never sacrifice them. She wanted to, you know, resuscitate the term selfish and you know, and revitalize. I want to do the same with liberal. We're liberals in the strict sense. We're supporters of liberty. You know, Bernie Sanders in the United States and Jeremy Corbyn in, you know, in the UK. These guys aren't liberals; they're statists. So I want to, you know, the LIB root, liberty. It means individual rights. I want to reclaim the term liberal in the same way Ayn Rand wants to reclaim the term selfishness. Anyway, I got off topic for a second.
Well, I'm with you on reclaiming liberal. I think it's much more of a misused term in the U.S. than in the U.K. But yeah, somehow in the U.S. it's completely upside down. You know, socialists are.
Yeah, absolutely. Socialism is not liberalism. Is exactly right.
So our next question is from Eamon, who is here live.
Hey, Eamon, how you doing, big guy?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm rocking and rolling, man.
I have a kind of a comment question. So there is a sort of significant amount of private for-profit education happening. So in America and in the UK. So you gave examples of, you know, tutoring. There's private schools. There are companies selling services, educational services, directly to pupils and, you know, indirectly through schools. Something I'm wondering is that I see this as, you know, an obvious avenue for, you know, the more you increase that in society, the less, you know, negative effect you'd get from government schools. And also I want to sort of make a parallel between education and, you know, the amount of government involvement in education and how that affects, for example, investment and research, innovation, and medicine. So in medicine, you know, you have a certain amount of innovation happening, and, you know, in different countries. So in America, there's a lot more innovation in medicine than in Europe, and you can maybe correlate that with the amount of government involvement. And also, I think there is a huge sort of opportunity, and you know, I see a sort of low-hanging fruit education for something that people in technology can help move the needle, because it's something that is very conducive to you know, people who are into technology to provide services. So there are companies out there which are using, for example, AI to provide so auto-generate curriculum and provide exercises for students, and to auto adjust to the students' level. So there's a company called NLearn, which there's an AI system which will test a student, and if the student, and it'll figure out if the student doesn't understand a particular concept, so it works at the conceptual, like at level of concepts, and automatically adjust the curriculum so that they're teaching them the exact concepts they need to know to get to the point of knowing a particular thing. So it's really good for examples of students who have holes in their knowledge. So it's very good. It'll figure out the holes and then give you exercises to fill in those gaps. So I think these things are sort of not vulnerable to, you know, a government coming in and saying you can't do this. People can set up these companies, provide the services, market them directly to parents, and also give them to schools. Even so, I'm basically saying, like, within this system of government controlled education, there's still quite a lot of freedom. So there's no you don't have to only attack the side of, you know, the government side of things. You could leverage the certain amount of market freedom that we already have.
No, I absolutely agree with you. You know, and there's, you know, and like you said, we've already mentioned a bunch of cases: homeschooling, tutoring, tutoring companies, tutoring individuals, you know, companies that manufacture very effective educational products like Hooked on Phonics has been around for a long time. And by the way, one thing to add to that, one example, is that there are a lot. Here's a good resource for parents who may not have the time to be full homeschoolers, or they feel they don't have the knowledge to be full homeschoolers. There is a lot of kids. They're in their 20s, let's say, in many cases. They're getting, you know, PhDs. They're grad students. They're getting PhDs in some real subject. They're not studying education. They're getting a PhD in chemistry, or they're getting a PhD in history, or they're getting a PhD in, you know, in philosophy, or you know, in physics or in literature. And they're not taking education courses. What that means is not, you know, they're taking the courses in their field, which means they should know their field. That doesn't mean they all will, but some will. They're grad students. They probably don't have a lot of money, you know, and with the technology, you know, with social media, you know, and Zoom and everything, they could advertise, you know, on social media. You know, tutor your kids for, you know, in chemistry for $30 an hour. You know, because, you know, $30 an hour for me as a grad student is you know, is a lot of money. But parents could advertise, and then they use Zoom, you know, or whatever. So I mean, the graduate students in real subjects, you know, they're not required to take education courses. Their courses are all in their subject. You know, they make a good resource for parents. They're profit driven and relatively low cost because, you know, to them, they need money. You know, so, you know, they can't charge $100 an hour yet. You know, but they could charge, you know, $30 or $40 an hour, and it works out. It works out for both sides. The starving graduate student gets a little bit of money, and it may be his first teaching experience, and the parents and the kids get the benefit of somebody who's actually, you know, very versed in the field that he's tutoring. Whereas the teachers, they have to take education classes, and they're not as knowledgeable in their field. You know, math majors study a lot more math than the education majors who are going to be math teachers, and they tend to know math much better. Isn't that interesting? They know math. The math majors know math generally much more than the math teachers know math, because the math majors study math. The education majors it's hybrid: math, some education, some education. And those education classes, from what I hear, tend to be a waste. Everybody I know who's gone through some kind of education program is just a horror story. It makes my time in graduate school studying philosophy seem like I was at Disneyland by comparison.
So yeah, there's one thing that made me think about is if you had a, you know, free market, you know, dominated education system, whether you would get sort of superstar teachers who would teach, you know, classes of tens of thousands of people online. So I always thought I thought naturally that kind of thing would happen, that you would have someone who's such a good teacher that people would just flock to them, and sort of they would be teaching.
Yeah, I think the freer the market is in education, I think the more that will happen. So somebody in India, let's say, you know, is just a superb teacher in, you know, fill in the blank, mathematics, or, you know, literature, or, you know, or whatever it is, and you know, the parents now, if we've abolished the government schools, remember, we need to also abolish the taxes that fund the government schools. We need to abolish the property taxes and the income taxes that fund the government schools. And now parents have more disposable income to pay, you know, to spend on their child's education. And here's this superstar teacher, like you said, I mean, in India, and he's going to charge, you know, whatever he's going to charge, $100 an hour or whatever, and you know, by teleconferencing on Zoom or whatever, and the parents pay them through their PayPal account. The technology is great for this. And then you get the superstar teacher teaching their kids math, and the parents oversee this. And if the children make advances, they continue to pay the superstar teacher, $100 an hour. If it's not working for their kids, they withdraw from that program. But yeah, it gives the opportunity for superstar teachers around the world to you could be a literature major living in the United States teaching kids in Hong Kong, and you could be a great math teacher in India teaching kids in in California, and and so on and so on. It's all they need is an internet connection, and then the disposable income to pay the superstar teacher. But yeah, it opens up all kinds of possibilities to for education, and the superstar teacher has to deliver, because the parents are, I always tell Penny when we're in the store, I've been telling her since we were little kids, because her mom generally pays things by credit card. Okay, that's a choice. But I always pay by cash. And I always tell Penny, pay by cash, because you see the money leaving your hand that way. You know how much you're spending. Whereas you put on your credit card, it's like, it's a game. And I put on my credit card, I walk out with the stuff. I didn't give them any money. And then you get the bill, and goes, oops, And so it's similar here. The superstar teacher's got to deliver, because mom and dad are paying. They're paying out of their own pocket. It's not their tax dollars, which is taken from them. It's their own money. You give them voluntarily. So the superstar teacher has to deliver, or else the parents, will withdraw and maybe go elsewhere. So it's the freer the market is of education, the more it opens up these possibilities, and the more the technology enables you to have access to superstar teachers all over the world. All over the world. It becomes a global economy of education. It's just, you have access to the best minds all over the world. Just like international free trade. You go into an American supermarket and you have these delicacies, these tropical fruit from South America, or from Asia. You have stuff from all over the world, good stuff from all over the world. It's similar here. This is international free trade and education. You have access to the best minds around the world. And like I said, when you abolish the taxes that fund the government schools, mom and dad have more money to pay these kind of superstar teachers that you're talking about, Amy.
Well, a couple of years ago, the night before I chaired a panel at the Objectivist Summer Conference on free speech in the UK, somebody recommended to me that I end on a positive note. I think even though this topic doesn't have a lot of positivity, that is a positive note. I look forward to seeing the world filled with these superstar teachers. And Melanie mentions in the chat that Andy is a superstar teacher with her kids. And he is a superstar speaker for us. So we appreciate you, Andy, and hopefully we'll see many people like you becoming teachers and bringing that revolution about.
Well, thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Razi. I greatly appreciate it. It's nice. It's always nice when your work is appreciated, especially by rational human beings for whom you have a great deal of respect and affection.
Well, thanks, Andy, and we will see you here again very soon. We will be back on Saturday with Josh, and then Monday and Wednesday of next week. And our daily Facebook Live show is every weekday at 6 p.m. UK time. So I recommend watching that. And if you can't watch it live, you can watch it later, both on Facebook and on YouTube. And it'll be on the podcast platforms as well very soon. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you soon.